Hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Maureen Reedy, the President and CEO of the Paley Center for Media, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this morning's Paley Dialogue with Adriana Cisneros, Yannick Bolloré, moderated by Aryeh Bourkoff. Adriana and Yannick are two of the world's youngest executives leading global media and advertising giants. Adriana is the third generation to lead Cisneros and the first female CEO. And Yannick is chairman and CEO of the Havas Group, one of the largest communications groups in the world, operating in 100 countries. For both of them, entrepreneurship and innovation have been key. Today, they will discuss what it takes to lead and grow companies that cross borders and platforms in this new era of media. Aryeh Bourkoff is founder and CEO of LionTree, the private investment firm behind many of the biggest deals in technology, media, and communications. He will moderate the discussion of how they implement innovation, where they see long-term growth opportunities, and how they are dealing with the profound changes in our industry. I am really, truly thrilled and honored to say that all three of our special guests today are members of the Paley Center Board of Trustees. Thank you so much for all of your support. Along with Adriana, Yannick, and Aryeh, I'd like to welcome some of our other trustees that are here in the audience, Nancy Dubuque, Catherine Oliver, and Stan Schumann. Thank you all for your support. And a big thanks to McKinsey, our long-term and valued official knowledge partner of this very special Paley Dialogue series. We are also delighted to have so many of our Media Council members with us here today. Thank you for all of your support. One quick housekeeping note, our next Paley Dialogue will be here on December 15th with Michael Roth, Chairman and CEO of IPG, and Keith Weed, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of Unilever. They will discuss the global shift in consumer behavior and how businesses need to think differently about developing a global content strategy. So December 15th, mark your calendars. And now I'm honored to welcome our special guests, Adriana, Yannick, and Aryeh.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maureen and the Paley Center for hosting us and for these fabulous introductions. I feel like I have prepared remarks and note cards and an agenda, but I figure we'll throw all that away since we know each other well and we have a lot to talk about. If it's okay being ad-libbed here a little bit.
Good idea.
So Yannick, Adriana, and I are all friends, and we also collaborate, commiserate, talk about the businesses that we're all focusing on in the media industry all the time. But for Adriana and Yannick, they work at companies that have very rich and storied traditions. Adriana, as Maureen mentions, a third-generation leader of Cisneros, and they have three divisions: the media division, the interactive division, which is one of the largest ad platform in Latin America, and the real estate division. And the company was started in 1929 by her grandfather, Diego Cisneros, and obviously then run by her esteemed father, Gustavo Cisneros. But it started as a material transport company.
That's right.
And which is fascinating because it speaks to the evolution of these businesses over time, which I think we're all going through now again in media. And before I get to Adriana's view of how that transition works, Havas was started in the early 1800s and is now one of the largest advertising agencies and communications companies around. But when it started, it really started as a way to transport information. And one of the more innovative ways of transporting information that I think most people may not know about is that Havas started by transporting that information through pigeons.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you know that,
Sure.
Maureen? There you go. So, welcome to the museum. But so I think it's fascinating to me because we're looking at companies now that are, when you look back 100 years from now, probably saying, can you believe how these companies started? And just another topical event, Time Warner and the AT&T merger. Time Warner, as many of you do know, started with Steve Ross in Kinney car garages. And that's really what transformed itself into Warner and then Time Warner. So all of us generationally are kind of in the same place. And yeah, we are a bit of the bridge generation where there's a real appreciation for where we've come from in the past while we're living in a period of time where there's tremendous innovation and look towards the future of technology. So how do you draw upon the richness of the past of your companies when you think about preparing and operating for the future? Adriana.
It's a good question, and I think in our case, if you look at the history of our company, we've been in so many different industries, but in a very orderly fashion. It seems like every 10, 15, 20 years, we realize that there's a new opportunity, that the world has changed in a significant way, and we dive deep into a new vertical so that we can build new businesses that are better for where the world is there. In our case, I would say that being a privately held, family-owned business helps because our horizon is 50, 60 years. We obviously think of the next 2 years and the next 5 years, but we're always planning for the long game. And in the case of our geography, I think that has been extremely beneficial in Latin America because things, the clock works differently down south. And there's a lot of opportunities that are only great if you can play the long game. So I think in our case, right now we have these three new divisions. Well, media, oddly enough, is our legacy business at this point. It's the business that we've always been in. And we have two new divisions, which are interactive and real estate. Those two divisions we started 4 years ago. And they're now sort of the driving force behind everything that we're doing. So we will continue to be on media in the traditional kind of way, where we're playing the long game, but obviously in my interactive businesses, we're playing a very short game. And it's quite fun when you get to play with both time horizons.
Absolutely. We'll get back to that. So Yannick, same question to you. How do you draw upon the rich past of the company and how you think about how you operate the businesses? And there's a book that you gave me when I went to visit your office of exactly that, like the history of Havas. So you weren't there the whole time, but how do you think about that?
Yeah. So we still have pigeons, huh? As you can imagine. No. That's true. That it's very interesting what Adriana just touched base on. I mean, being part of a family business, it's a completely different way to operate a business than when you're held by a financial firm, because the opportunity to build for the long term, for the next generation, for the future, I would say it's completely changing your mind as a CEO how you operate. For instance, for Havas, I mean, the decision have been taken when I was appointed CEO 4 years ago. I'm sure I wouldn't have taken those decisions if it was not a family-owned business, because I knew that on the short term, it could have been very much difficult, because breaking every silo, changing the way the company was operating, because we needed to adapt to the digital and social media and all the media transformation everybody knows in this room. It has been very painful for the company, and being able to take this decision, because I knew I couldn't be fired that easily by the board of Havas. I would say was a true relief. And at the end of the day, when we look at the results, even on the short term, because I'm only talking about 3 or 4 years, it has been an amazing journey. And Havas, even on this very short period of time, has completely, I would say, outperformed the entire industry. So I would say that the ability to see long term is even very much beneficial on the short term, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But when you look at everything, what's happening in your industry, in the M&A, and why people are taking those decisions, I'm not sure a family business would have been taking this kind of decision that we can read every day in the FT and in the business pages of the different industry, even in the TMT in the world. So I would say that the ability to see the long term and to take the decisions who are going in the main interest of the company, and the company are not only the shareholders, it's also the people, the clients, or the tool that we have. I think it's something that would differentiate Adriana and us from the other TMT companies.
Well, also, I think the fact that you're here and extending the French typical work week is something that's probably the differentiator for you. No, I'm joking, but I think it's a combination of the shrewdness of the and boldness of the structure, in addition to the traditional operations. For example, Yannick in 2006 started the media group at Bolloré, and then eventually sold to Canal+, which allowed them to become a major shareholder of Vivendi. So you need to be, I think, innovative from a structuring perspective as well. But talk about that, Adriana. I mean, how challenging is it and exhilarating is it right now to be an operator in the media business? Because it does take a lot of boldness, I think.
I do panic when I read the headlines in the US, but I'm going to let you explain to the audience how all these mergers work or do not work. In our case,
Not getting it off that easy.
And fortunately, in our case, for what I'm doing right now, it's the perfect time to be in my space. Finally, this convergence of traditional media and digital media has happened. We don't have to talk about it anymore. It's now a fact, and we're very well positioned to be able to make great things with that. On the one hand, we've been running and operating traditional, which I don't like calling media traditional ever because it never is traditional, but traditional media assets in every country in Latin America for a really long time. And for the past 3 years, we've been building what's now sort of the largest digital outfit in Latin America that helps monetize all sorts of digital traffic across all platforms. And I'm having such a good time integrating both strategies. And we're building something that is very meaningful and significant. So although I'm not part of the larger conversation about these giant mergers, we're doing our own internal merger, which I think is going to turn out to produce a media asset where we're not going to have a lot of competitors doing what we do. It's pretty cool.
Fascinating. Yannick, the same question to you. I mean, when you look at the landscape, especially in Europe now with Brexit and a lot of disruption overall in the bigger picture, but you do have a longer-term view. How do you create that boldness and the challenges of operating these companies?
I mean, it's very complicated. First of all, Brexit has been a surprise for everyone. And I remember this night, it was the 23rd of June, it was Cannes Lions, so it's an advertising festival in Cannes. Everybody was here and everybody was commenting Brexit. And it was very interesting. I was having dinner it was a Viacom dinner, I think the last Philippe Doman's dinner, hosting the event. And I was having dinner with Martin Sorrell. And we were all together with the other holding CEOs, and Michael Ross was here, and Martin was explaining us that since the turnout was very high, it was sure that the Brexit will never happen. So I trusted him because he looked very smart. Yeah, so I went to bed very happy, and then wake up the next day. It was a complete nightmare. But it's very interesting because sometimes surprise happens, and when you operate a business, you have to remain agile. For instance, UK for us was supposed to be our new headquarters for Europe, moving from Paris to London to try to match where clients are based. So we have just invested tons of millions of pounds in the new headquarters that we will open in 2 months. So you're all invited. But I'm not sure it's going to be super crowded now. But we have not been visionary. But what's interesting is what I said to the team, because they were very, all you can imagine all the British people working at Havas are young, living in cities, so they were, I would say the vast majority of them were in favor of the Remain. So they were all very sad, and they were asking me, so will you continue to invest in the UK? And I would say on the opposite, Havas today has decided to support the UK more than ever. So not only are we going to continue to invest in the UK, but we have just announced an acquisition in the UK last week. And I think myself, I'm going to spend even more time in the UK because I think that we need to see once again on long-term period and to be able to adapt. And I think that the turmoil in the UK, which is almost considered as a crisis, could lead to a good opportunity. And it's always, and by the way, the same word in Chinese or ancient Greek for crisis and opportunity. And I think this is a good period of time for us to try to see how we can make a difference in the UK, just supporting them, being here, hiring the best talents, continue being there. And it's the same in Southern Europe. I remember if we would have this discussion like 5 years ago, everybody was talking about pigs and BRICS. Right. And the pigs was Portugal, Italy, Spain. Well, let's say Greece it's still down. But now Portugal, Italy, and Spain have completely bounced back and recovered. And everybody wanted to invest in BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China became a major power, and South Africa, which is also going through very much difficult times. So I think we need to remain agile, and we need to understand that it's always a question of cycles. So being able to be a worldwide company like Havas, being present in every region in the world, I think it gives us a big opportunity to hedge a different position. And I think this is really something more and more important, is how can you be able to match global companies, because most of you are working in global companies and you have presence all over the world, is to have managed to build those strong networks. And at the end of the day, if everybody works together, collaborate together, those cycles, I mean, will keep you up at night, because of course, and especially in the US, I don't know what's going to happen next Tuesday. I'm not a specialist, but it's going to...
You should ask Martin.
We should ask him. Good idea. Yeah, we should text him. But it's going to be a different journey for the US, and it will have an impact on South America, on Europe. So, I mean, but we continue to invest and to support, of course, the United States, that will remain a great country. So, at the end of the day, I think it's very important to understand that we should not only read what financial analysts are saying, and we should listen to our team, to our clients, and to try to build the best tools, to have the best technology, the best partnership with the best media companies, and to have the best people to make sure that we will be successful on a long-term period.
That is the most exciting thing to me about both of you and a few others like you that are long-term oriented, that have private companies or public companies with a lot of security, because you could effectively make decisions over a much longer period of time with a global perspective, taking advantage of disconnects and asset movements and prices and regulatory changes. Whereas a lot of companies today that are public are governed by very short-term results, which is almost an impossible situation to navigate through, both operationally and strategically. And it creates outcomes and pressure points that I think is very hard for a CEO of a company that's sort of at the end of their lifeline to navigate through. So I think when you look at your company internally and you think about long-term kind of visions of it. I remember one time I went to the Paley Center and saw you interviewed, and you said you had a 30-year model about what could happen in the future.
Yep.
And I was blown away by that, because I don't know anybody at that point that were thinking that long-term, and you have to.
You have to. And I think there's also a bit to build on what Yannick was saying. In our case, when you see the decisions that my grandfather was making early on, and then the way that my father grew the business, the way that we dealt with the uncertainty of Latin American countries is by being in a lot of countries at the same time. Mm-hmm. So this sort of the pan-regional discipline has allowed us to actually feel really comfortable working in Latin America always, right? So a lot of people panic when they see the headlines about, okay, Argentina's great now, but it wasn't great for 15 years. Venezuela's a mess now, but it wasn't a mess 15 years ago, right? And if you have operations and you're building a business from the beginning with pan-regional aspirations, things go up and down, but the overall story of Latin America is extremely positive if you don't get stuck in the individual stories of the different countries, right? So I think that helps. That helps a lot when you're working in developing countries or in different markets that are more volatile. You can weather it in a better way.
So diversification is good.
And pan-regional aspirations always are good.
Yep. So Yannick, from an M&A perspective, interest rates are low. You did a deal last few weeks, you said. But companies are taking bolder bets because they can accelerate their visions through mergers and acquisitions. But some of it's diversification, some of it's hedging, some of it's not knowing exactly where the world goes and creating more of a conglomerate structure. AT&T Time Warner is obviously the biggest one and most recent. Do you have a perspective of that from where you're sitting?
Yes, of course. I mean, both companies are great partners at Havas. I think it's very interesting because for bankers, I think it's very good. So I'm very happy for you because it will lead to many other deals. But it's very interesting because everybody's talking about convergence between a telco and media, which I believe, because I understand that a telco company needs to differentiate themselves from the competition. So what's the difference between AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and T-Mobile, besides the price and the network? So I understand the rationale of having content. But if you want to be if you want to really build on this thinking, you have to get exclusive content. What I understand of this deal is that the exclusivity will not be granted for regulatory reasons or just for business reasons, because I'm not sure that HBO or CNN would have an interest to be exclusively distributed on AT&T. So at the end of the day, it will build what you call a conglomerate. You will have, if it goes to the end, AT&T distribution, which is the telco part, and AT&T content, which will be built on Time Warner, which is interesting. But so they will go with a share discount, and the culture of the company, I'm not sure will be the same. We used to have at Vivendi in our company, let's say the French Time Warner, Canal Plus, and the French AT&T SFR. So it's the both largest content provider and telco distributors, and that didn't really work to each other. Not because they didn't want to, but they didn't see exactly the rationale, because if you go put yourself in the shoes of, let's say, Time Warner, you want to maximize the opportunity of getting distributed. So at the end of, so it was not easy. So I'm really looking forward to see what this deal will create as a value. But we can see that everywhere in the world, telcos are investing in content. We can see that, I would say that telcos are like the trees, and content, whether it is video content or musical content or sport, are like the fruits. So I understand the principle of convergence, but business-wise and I would say on operational basis, I think it's going to be very, very tough to make it work. So I do think that the execution will be instrumental in the further success of deals like those. But they will change for sure the way we will all operate, even from a media standpoint for a company like ours, because it will completely change the paradigm. So if everybody does the same, because at the end of the day everybody is doing the same or having the same type of thinking, it could really be a tipping point, I would say, in our industry. So I'm super cautious on the consequences. And as we discussed earlier this morning, I think we will need once again to adapt, to make sure that in our company we will take the appropriate decisions to continue being successful in the future.
Adriana, what do you think of the merger, but also the concept of accelerating the strategic objectives through big M&A?
What do you think, Aryeh?
I agree with a lot of what Yannick says. I mean, we're not involved in the AT&T Time Warner deal, just for full disclosure, but the concept of vertical integration or distribution companies having content is not something that I think that everyone will copy. It has worked in the past at moments in time, whether it's for defensive reasons or for offensive reasons. But I think some of this merger activity is done because of de-risking the future landscape. And some of it's done from an innovative perspective. And AT&T Time Warner is, in my mind, so far, much more of a defensive move. It's almost like everyone's getting ready for the election in the US, but beforehand I said, well, we could merge into Canada and not worry about it anymore.
Well put.
Everyone would feel pretty good about it at the moment. Next week, 2 weeks later, a few later, not sure exactly how it works out,
Yeah.
right? So I think a lot of that is emblematic of the uncertainty and the anxiety out there right now. I think very deftly handled by Time Warner and Jeff Bourkoff and the management team to kind of acknowledge that the landscape is going in a different place. And sometimes it's better to have a big brother, a big sister, so to speak, as you go. But it is I think a testament to the bundle. It seems to be something that will be intact versus the a la carte or skinny bundle mentality from having a large distributor buying a content company. But I think it's much more interesting to see what you guys are doing on the operating side. Just, having a long-term view, creating models, expanding the content to businesses to the consumer around the world. That has very strong long-term implications for where the world is actually going, and doesn't need M&A to do that, so to speak.
Yep. I agree.
Okay. So talk about, each of you have done some M&A though recently that are more tuck-ins and more strategic, not break the bank deals, but deals that obviously further your goals. Can you just talk about that, Adriana?
Sure, happily. We've had, so when we created our interactive division, we actually arrived at the decision of creating interactive from the experience that we had on the media side. You know, our family, or my father started Univision, which is the leading, well, was until like 2 weeks ago, the leading Spanish language network in the U.S. With two partners, with Emilio Escárraga and Jerry Perenchio. And we invented the Latino phenomena through Univision. And it was an amazing demographic to work with. And you know, you fast forward 15, 20 years, and as a company, we really understand, properly understand what the Hispanics or the Latinos are actually about. And it has nothing to do with language or what country they came from originally. It's a culture. And once you understand that, you start looking at the way that they want to consume media differently, right? So we start seeing how there's all this content online. This is 5 years ago in the US, premium content, and then nobody's monetizing. And the numbers are crazy because the Hispanics over-index in digital behavior over any other group in the United States. So they spend the most time online, they consume the most amount of content, they do the most amount of shopping, they have the most amount of iPads. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? This sort of the digital life of the Hispanic market is really cool. And we're like, wow, it's so strange. Like everybody's trying to figure out how to get their hands on premium video content, but nobody's monetizing the stuff that's in Espanol in the United States. So we decided to do interactive to help precisely to monetize all this digital content. And when we decided to do it in the US, we said, well, we might as well, if we're going to do it here, we might as well go and have pan-regional aspirations and do it all over Latin America. I think we dared do that because we had worked in every country in Latin America for so long that it's quite easy for us to parachute into a country and set up an office and get things going. So long story short, I moved down to Miami because in 6 months, we opened 11 offices in 9 countries. And we acquired or partner with 10 different companies and quickly built what became the largest network in Latin America and the US Hispanic market. And we do really cool things there. You know, for example, a new company, or I call it a feature, my partners call it companies, that we launched is Audio Ad, which is the first audio ad network in Latin America. So we're helping monetize advertising on audio, on digital audio, right? And it also works with traditional radio because people now listen to traditional radio through their phone or their computer. So instead of serving one ad on a traditional radio, we're helping radio stations serve 50 ads that are hyper segmented and targeted if they want. So that's pretty cool. And then we also, Sebastian, our partners here, we launched what is now the largest influencer marketing firm in the world in terms of influencers, called Fluvip, and now we're determined to make it the largest one in terms of revenues as well. And we can have those aspirations because we partner with Sebastian, and what we bring to the table, he brings the platform, right? He brings this amazing product, and what we bring to the table are offices and operations in every country in Latin America, where we can also offer a lot of other features or work together with all of our other companies as a package that we offer clients. Mm-hmm. So it's been fun, and yes, those acquisitions were small by your account, for sure. They still take a lot of time. It doesn't matter how big or small the deal is, right? The process is actually quite similar. But at the end of the day, when we were able to have everybody start working together, we built something that is quite large and meaningful.
And the interactive platform is getting the attention of a lot of the technology companies in Silicon Valley. So Yannick, tell us about the Skim.
I mean, yeah, no, at Havas we are doing many acquisitions, just to build up on what Adriana just said. I mean, it's crazy how the media advertising landscape is moving so fast. I mean, it's every 6 months, every 3 months, there is a new technology that is completely reshifting everything, and constantly we need to adapt. I remember it was 3 years ago, just to give you an anecdote, so you will understand how technology is important for for a media company like Havas and why we are doing so many acquisitions and investing in so many companies, trying not to be lost in this or to miss any new technology. I was going to San Francisco. I had a very important meeting with the Google folks, which is our #1 partner in terms of media. And I remember perfectly, it was January 2014, so it's not so long ago. And I get down from the plane, and as everyone, I take my phone, and I just received a text message from a sushi restaurant near my hotel, saying, "Hi Yannick, welcome to San Francisco. If you want to have salmon sushi tonight near your hotel, it's 25% discount." Say, what the? And first, how do they know I'm in San Francisco? And how do they know my hotel? And how do they know that I like salmon sushi? And it really kept me up at night because it was, but that's true, it was meaningful advertising, you know, the right message at the right people at the right time on the right device. So I say, what's going on? Have we done that? I talked to my media team. Have we done that? No, I don't know. What is it? So this is the future of advertising. And I was seeing the people at Google the next day, and I told them about my experience. They say, yes, we did it. I say, what do you mean you did it? Yeah, it's us. It's our new experimentation. So they say, how do you do? I say, how do you know that I'm in San Francisco first? They say, yeah, but we track you with Waze. I don't know if you use Waze, but your location is always active. Even if you don't use the app, they track you every time. So we track you. Okay, good. Why not? I say, yeah, but how do you know where was my hotel? I say, but we track your calendar. Because in the terms and conditions that you all read, I'm sure, you accept to be, so they can read your calendar, so they know the location of my hotel. Like, cool, wow. And then I say, okay, but sushi salmon, you've been lucky. I said, no. What do you mean? I say, but we have an algorithm with 1,000 variables, and we read all your emails. And this is true that the week before, I have exchanged emails with my wife. She was asking me, what do you want for dinner? I say, no, let's get sushi. This is a true story. Huh? I say, my God. So this is changing everything, basically. So since that day, I say, okay, now we need to move into technology. So every time we can find a new way to invest into something, at the end of the day, we will do it. We have even changed the mission of the group. So before, the mission of the group was to help brands advertise.
With pigeons.
Yeah, with pigeons, yeah, but still.
Come a long way.
And today, the mission of the group is how to create meaningful connections, because we want to help our advertisers to talk to the right person at the right time on the right device. So this is really what we are trying to do since. So we are investing in dozens of companies every year, trying to attract the best talent, the best data scientists, the new innovators. So every time we see something innovative new, we're trying to catch up, because I don't want to be surprised again by this type of text message. So now we are doing it ourselves. So it's a little bit frightening. It raises other questions, but this is, I guess, the new life we are living in.
Excellent. I think we'll take 1 or 2 questions from all of you. Please.
So I assume you speak to your wife in French. So did they actually do the translation?
Yeah, of course.
Google Translate.
But even with WeChat, you know, I don't know if you use WeChat. I really encourage you to download WeChat and to use it, because it's one of the best social tools, if not the best in the world.
Yeah, owned by Tencent.
Yeah, owned by Tencent, which is a great company. And they automatically translate. So when I talk to my Chinese team, even if they don't speak English, they write in Chinese, and I receive the text in English. So it's a new way to communicate with people.
I use it.
Yeah, no, it's good, no?
It's great.
So now you have, for free, tools that translate every languages.
Yeah. Any other questions about Yannick's cuisine? Please.
I agree with Adriana that a long-term vision is much more opportunistic and lucrative. How do you think that affects sort of fund structure and the investment community?
That's a great question. I think we are experiencing a realignment of the capital bases, whether it's public or private, with the media models. It's happening quietly and in a very kind of disruptive way with a lot of friction, which is why I think it's not particularly, as a overall statement, a great time for shareholders, because they're designed to get a short-term result. And a lot of the last decade has been built up by hedge funds and capital flows that are much more short-term oriented as a new part of the asset class. Whereas instead in this industry, it's much more designed towards a long-term view of capital. And that's where our role comes into place a lot. And that is probably the most difficult thing to accomplish, to align capital with long-term business models. And it's a much better time for operating a long-term business or deal making or pundits or professors than it is for a shareholder base. And that is getting absorbed by either private capital, not just private equity, because that's also relatively short-term with a high cost of capital. But family offices, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and strategic families and capitals that can bring these companies into a private domain to operate a lot more effectively with a long period of time. Even Vivendi's shareholder base and their structure is probably the most interesting of any of the media companies because there's only one class of stock, not 2 or 3 classes of stock to protect themselves. One class of stock that rewards long-term investing. So you buy a share of stock, if I'm getting this right, and you accumulate votes the longer you hold it. The minute you sell the stock, it resets. So people that want a say and a long-term vote have to hold the stock for a long period of time. That's a public company, Vivendi. So that's a much better way of doing it than I think having multiple classes of stock. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 2 years. After 2 years now, it's a new law in France to encourage long-term investments and not short-term. When you hold a stock after 2 years, you have double voting rights automatically.
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah,
Right.
which
So
makes
that
sense.
encourages that dynamic.
But 2 years, it's not that long, huh?
Correct.
It's, you know what I mean? It's really something you can wait for, 2 years.
That's right. That's right. It's a good question.
Talk a little about your investment in Troy Carter's venture Smashed and how you decide what emerging platforms and new companies and visions you want to get behind and why.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Troy is a former manager of Lady Gaga and a great investor and entrepreneur. And we have done this partnership together. The idea is how we can create IP for brands. So for brands not only to pay for media attention, but to create its own, I would say, cultural event or any type of intellectual property they can develop. And it's really, I would say, something based on esteem or friendship with Troy. It's really because we partner together, really like each other. We decided to create this joint venture together. But once again, I would say it participates for us to how can we continuously being innovative, being, I would say, ahead of the competition in terms of anticipating what the future will be. And the future, it could be next week. You know what I mean? It's getting so fast. So we have done partnership with Troy, but we have done also partnership with every universities in the world, with MIT, with USC here, with Ternion in Israel. They are very, very strong in mathematics, with Korean universities. So the more we can have all these knowledgeable people, smart people partnering with us on a Havas basis or on a Vivendi basis, the better I think we will be to take the right decision for our company, our people, and our clients.
This question is for Adriana. What do you project for the growth of Spanish language media in the United States in the next 10 years? Do you see it morphing into something more bilingual, or do you actually see a growth in Spanish language specifically?
I think the bilingual experiment has been a proven disaster. I think fusion is a disaster, and I think that's why they keep trying to change what kind of channel they are. People get really stuck with this whole, the Hispanic millennial is a very confusing new category. And I always go back to this thing that it's really not about language and it is about culture. And you have to sort of find a way of understanding that insight to understand what that culture is. And, I like to watch TV in Spanish and I like to watch TV in English. And everybody should be okay with that. People should not be in a panic that the Hispanics are starting to watch HBO. Let them watch HBO. It's fine, but also step up the game, right, and start producing content that is going to be culturally relevant to them in spite of language. I think that's the clue. I don't think we're going to see any more bilingual experiments.
In front, yes.
Actually, I couldn't agree more with Adriana. We're experiencing the same thing with Prisa. I would like to ask you, which for us has been like a very nebulous presence right now, which is Brazil, which is Latino, it's cultural, but it's totally different from the rest of the region. How do you foresee the media in the country? How do you think things are going to develop with the political crisis?
So my answer is going to be a little bit controversial. Obviously Brazil, when I say pan-regional, I don't exclude Brazil. Brazil has always been part of our oyster, let's say. And I was frustrated when we were launching the early days of Interactive. I couldn't get into Brazil because it was really expensive. All of it. I mean, from the deals to the office spaces. Like I could never make it work. And I thought all of it was overvalued, and it was frustrating because I wanted to start in Brazil, not finish with Brazil. And it ended up being the other way around. Brazil ended up being the last office that we opened, and in the last place where we were able to source deals. And then, the crisis began, and the market starts, balancing itself out. And we've managed to make some really, really, really interesting acquisitions now. We just bought the leading influencer platform in Brazil, and we've merged it with Fluvib, which is what has helped us become the largest. And I couldn't have bought that company 3 years ago. So I actually think it's a great time to go to Brazil. It's a great time to figure out what companies you can buy because they're all for sale, and the Brazilians are so depressed. They haven't recuperated from the World Cup. I mean, it's like this huge hangover, right, from the World Cup, and now they have the political crisis, and you have, all the investigations that are never going to end, and Lava Jato, and I mean, it's like a hangover that never ends. So I like being in Brazil, and I like what we're doing in Brazil, and I'm super excited that I can finally have a meaningful presence there, and that I can integrate my Brazilian team fully with my Latin American team. And in the digital space, Brazil's doing great, and we're benefiting a bit from the uncertainty because a lot of clients that in the past had giant budgets that now have smaller budgets for the first time are trying to be smarter with the way that they're spending their money. And smarter means digital, where I can measure everything to death, and they like that. So we've been able to attract really, really great clients that, was it not for the crisis, they wouldn't even have anybody looking at digital properties.
Any final questions? Well, Yannick and Adriana, I look forward to watching you both operate your companies over a long period of time and coming back every few years, and we can see how the impact you've made in the overall industry.
And hopefully you're going to help us sell some of our companies as well.
Twist my arm. I'd be happy to. It'd be my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you.